When you look at the Supreme Court's treatment of Hindu Dharma, I would classify it under different baskets. One, what is the Supreme Court's understanding of Hindu Dharma is the first question. Whether it sees Hindu Dharma through a dharmic lens or through an anglicized Abrahamic lens is the first question that you should ask. Because if all of us are on the same page that dharma and religion are not the same as each other, and that since English as a language is poor and cannot accommodate your concepts, therefore you are forced to use religion as an equivalent of dharma, is the judiciary aware of this critical distinction? That's the first question. Second, if dharma is not religion and therefore is not an Abrahamic concept, that means dharma cannot be approached with the black and white lens of Abrahamic religions. Because the one thing that is critical to Hindu dharma is sampradayic diversity, multiple sampradayas. For the followers of a certain sampradaya, their definition of Hindu dharma starts and ends with their sampradaya. That is all they are expected to follow. Why? When you are effectively told you can follow anything you want, and the basket of options that is presented to you is in the form of a vast ocean called Sanatana Dharma, you are bound to be lost in that ocean. Therefore, you need a sampradaya which has a guru at the fountainhead and a deity which is effectively seen as the Gangotri of that particular sampradaya, so that you have a very specific path to follow, so that there is clarity in what is expected of you. Therefore, sampradaya and sampradayic diversity are critical to your understanding of Hindu Dharma. Now, what does this mean? The deity may be the same in certain sampradayas, but the traditions of each sampradaya with respect to the same deity may be different. So, I'll give you an example. So, there was this popular Padmanabha Swami temple case of Thiruvananthapuram where everybody was interested in the treasure. More than anything else, they were interested only in the treasure. Unfortunately so. So, one particular gentleman, I don't wish to name any individuals because I'm not interested in individuals, I'm interested in issues and principles, who had some authority, came to the temple and said, why is Venkatesa Suprabhatam not being chanted in the Padmanabha Swami temple? And why is Hanuman Chalisa not being chanted in the Padmanabha Swami temple? Because his point was, Venkateshwara is Vishnu, Padmanabha is Vishnu, so therefore you should be chanting this. This is the failure of even educated Hindus to understand the distinction between deity and sampradaya and that specific swarupam, so to speak. So they could be traced from Vishnu, but the manifestation is different. Accordingly, the rituals will be different. The Padmanabha Swami temple has a significant element of Tantra, and therefore what it follows will be different. So you can't say, come and chant Venkateswara Suprabhatam here. Now, once you understand this distinction, you will not give rise to certain, pardon my language, certain stupid questions. So for instance, when the Ayyappa Swami case was going on, the Sabarimala case was going on, I had this brilliant question being asked on a regular basis. Anjaneya Swami is also Brahmachari, Ayyappa is also Brahmachari. Women are allowed inside his temple, why are they not allowed in this temple? So imagine, and these questions were not coming from non-Hindus. These questions were not coming from the Christians and the Muslims. These questions were coming from Hindus, from educated families, supposedly educated families, let me add that caveat, and who called themselves Hindu families. So their education is certainly in question, and their Hindu claim is also an insignificant question according to me. And these were the ones to ask this question. Now, therefore, it clearly tells me that it is mighty convenient of us to sit and blame the judiciary or the government or everybody else. But these people come from the society. And this is the reflection of the current state of the Hindu society. That these people who occupy these positions of power and responsibility obviously are choices that you have thrown up as a society. And therefore, there is no point in pointing fingers at one particular institution and calling it an anti-Hindu institution when the society itself has become unconsciously or subconsciously anti-Hindu without knowing that. And they believe that they are Hindu simply because they visited a temple. So this critical aspect is important because unless and until you understand this critical concept of sampradaya, you will always arrive at the conclusion that Hindu institutions are traditional in nature, they are conservative in nature, and that they don't open their doors to everyone. And that is why there is a fundamental weakness in Hinduism. And therefore, you will welcome everything at the expense of the living traditions that people like the Puja Acharyas follow. The one thing that as Hindus we have not been able to understand is that the anushtanas that they follow, we are not in a position to follow, nor are we capable of following it. What we follow for all practical purposes is what I would call Samanya Dharma, which is Hindu Dharma as practiced by the common Hindu, which is not the whole and soul of it. It is nowhere as close to, let's say, the purer form or the purest form that it is supposed to be. And therefore, you must strike a distinction between what they are entitled to do and what you are entitled to do, because your discipline and your commitment to Dharma is not the same. So when someone says, why can't I enter the Garbhagriha? You should ask him, what is your authority? And this authority is not a caste-based question. It is on spiritual practice-based question. Which is to say, are you following the anushtanas that they are expected to follow? If not, please don't get in. It doesn't make a difference whether you're a woman or a man, it just doesn't make a difference. Now, these are aspects which I think are fundamentally muddled in the Hindu mind itself. And therefore, it is critical to preserve these islands of dharmic purity so that they can continue to spread the message of Dharma and remove these layers of ignorance from our heads so that we understand the implications of a judicial verdict. Because the people who celebrated the Sabarimala decision mostly were the Hindus, not others. So it's like this, it's a two-way street. The institution does something without understanding Dharma, but the community also welcomes it without understanding Dharma. It's obviously a clap, and therefore you need both the hands. So when you speak of judicial verdicts, one, I said, you have to ask yourself whether the institution understands the concept of Dharma and its distinction from religion, point number one. Does it understand the concept of Sampradaya and its centrality to Hindu Dharma, point number two. Point number three. Then you go to the question of what is the institution's position with respect to control of nerve centers of Dharma and therefore temples. Point number five, or rather four. I cannot focus exclusively on how a Hindu is being treated in this country when this is not a country which is exclusively of Hindus, when there are other people also. So automatically I'm bound to ask this question. Not only do I want to know how you're treating me, I want to know whether you're treating me at least at par with others. So how does the question of equality or discrimination arise? If it's an exclusively a Hindu country full of only Hindus, then the question of discrimination between religions does not arise. But equality and discrimination become relevant when there are others and you see that they're being treated differently. So assume for a moment, and I've given this example before, that you were a student in a classroom and you realize that the teacher has the power to give corporal punishment, physical punishment to every student. but the teacher is constantly singling you out and slapping you on a regular basis. Your first question will be, why am I being slapped? Your second question will be, why am I the only person being slapped? Both these questions will arise. So at this point, both these questions have arisen in the Hindu mind with respect to the judicial treatment and the state's treatment of Hindus as a community and our institutions. Now, the one thing that you have to realize is that whenever you speak of state control of temples, your mind immediately says, I need the state for security, I need the state for maintenance, I need the state for crowd management, I need the state to handle administrative issues. And therefore, I'm happy to tolerate the presence of the state in the temple as long as they don't touch my religion, as long as they don't touch my religious affairs. According to me, there can't be a more self-defeating distinction. The institution's management and administration is in the hands of a different entity altogether, which is dying to call itself a secular entity, doesn't want to call itself a Hindu entity. And a fundamentally secular entity is holding the reins of the administration of your religious institutions, and you're operating under the naive belief that they will control only secular aspects which won't have an impact on religious aspects. How is that even possible? If the money is in their hands, the ability and the power to appoint people to different positions is in their hands, your security is in their hands, how do you hope to have the freedom only with respect to religious affairs? How is that even possible? Not possible. So to assume that as long as the state gives me the commitment that it will not interfere with religious aspects of an institution, I am happy and therefore my religion is secure, impossible. Because what you believe are the secular aspects are the ones that give you the power to invest in the society. Money, if it is secular, is the one that gives you the ability to invest in your community. So how can that essential aspect be in the hands of the government? Sri Hari will vouch for this particular fact. The Jagannath Mandir in Puri is effectively run by 36 mathas. It's called the Chhattis Nijog. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It has participation from all the four Varnas. All the four Varnas. Especially during the Ratha Yatra, who we call Adivasis are the ones who have the first right to see the deity as well as pull the Ratha. It has a different tradition altogether. Now, each of the mathas are in the control of state government bureaucrats. Each of them sing, I don't have money, I don't have money. When the daily ritual of Jagannath Puri as a temple is based on contribution of all the 36 mathas, and over the years, every matha has progressively stopped its contribution to the daily ritual. So what you see in Jagannath Puri, now Sri Hari made an important distinction between big temples and chick temples is what he called it, small temples, right? Okay. Now, I am trying to tell you, even in these so-called big temples, this is what happens. Now, if this is the fate of big temples, then imagine what must be happening with chick temples. So in these big temples, citing lack of resources, which is the secular aspect which you have given to the government, he is saying, I can't give today's prasada, do whatever you want. I don't have the money to renovate. I don't have the money to maintain this library. I don't have the money to digitize this particular manuscript. I don't have the money to ensure that people do not come and do something that they're not supposed to in a temple in terms of security, employing CCTVs and whatnot. So, this belief goes against dharmic principles because dharma and artha go hand in dharmic philosophy. In fact, if you read Mahapariva's book, Chandrasekhara Saraswati's book, Devatin Kuril and its English translation, he makes a very clear point that for fulfillment of dharma you need artha. And therefore, if Artha is in the hands of the state, which is the Rajya, how on earth do you think you have the freedom to fulfill your Dharma? Not possible. So let us break this wall completely, which says religious and secular are two different things. No, that is the Christian mentality, that is Christian philosophy, that is not Hindu philosophy. Hindu philosophy effectively says Dharma and Artha go hand in hand. We realize that you need Lakshmi to run even an institution that is dedicated to Saraswati. We are very clear about that. We don't need to be embarrassed about the fact that you need money to run a religious institution. Hinduism does not celebrate poverty. It does not celebrate poverty. If you believed in poverty, would you be able to provide facilities to all the followers of this particular matha or any other matha for that matter when they come from different places? They come from all walks of life. All of them may not be equally placed as far as their status is concerned. Therefore, the one place that they come must act as a leveler, so that everybody is treated as one here, and therefore facilities must be provided. Where will that money come from? So when someone tells you, why should a religious institution have so much money? Please ignore that person as a secular Hindu idiot, because he doesn't know what he is talking about. Anyone who tells you that a religious institution must not have money because the moment it has money it is corrupt, then thank you, let the state not collect taxes. Because the moment you contribute something by way of tax to the state, well, it is bound to become corrupt. And the state is fundamentally corrupt according to me. Whether it has money or not, it doesn't make a difference. So therefore, first break that wall in your head. Second, I'll keep giving you examples as I go along. When you have a matha or a temple, why do Hindus contribute land to that particular temple or matha? What is the logic? Two reasons, largely two reasons. One, that the temple or that land acts as a source of revenue for the temple. That's one. Second, land translates to real estate, translates to Hindu presence. So that the land which is adjoining a temple or a matha must be owned by people who are followers of the sampradaya of that matha, so that they respect the tradition of that matha or temple. Otherwise, you will have slaughterhouses opened right outside the matha. If it happens to be a Shakta matha, then that's a different issue. It can have a slaughterhouse, no problem. But even then, it must be cut not in the halal fashion, but in the Hindu fashion, which is the Jhatka fashion. Therefore, even if it happens to be a Shakta tradition, I would be happy to give a meat house to someone who happens to be a practitioner of the Shakta tradition and to nobody else. Not just to any Hindu, I will give it only to someone who practices that particular sampradaya. Understand that. So even within Hinduism, if the temple or the matha subscribes to a particular philosophy, the administration and the assets of that particular matha or temple must be with the followers of that particular philosophy. It's not enough if he happens to be a Hindu. Please understand that. So think of Hinduism like a telescope. The largest lens or the bigger lens is the Hindu lens, but it keeps opening into small lenses, and each small lens is the sect and the subsect. So if the institution belongs to the subsect, then the institution must be run by people who are in that particular subsect. Why is this point important? 2 days ago, the Supreme Court has come out with a verdict saying, when you issue tenders for shops surrounding a certain temple, apparently non-Hindus can apply for that particular tender. Because it is a secular activity. What has it got to do with religion? You see how this distinction works? The moment you separate the secular from the religious in the context of a religious institution, you are creating an anomaly, because everything about a religious institution is religious, 100%. Why? Because I am interested in using the resources of my community only for my community is good and nobody else is good. I am entitled to make that particular statement. I don't need to prove my secular credentials with respect to a religious institution. If I can't be religious with respect to a religious institution, where will I be religious? I don't understand. Look at the stupidity of this position. This is the one place where I'm allowed to wear my religion on my sleeve, where I'm entitled to say, yes, I'm a Hindu, yes, I'm a Shakta, yes, I'm a Shaivite. Nobody else who does not subscribe to this particular sampradaya has a business entering into this particular place. Whether you're a Hindu or not doesn't make a difference. As long as you do not subscribe to the traditions of this particular place, you will not set foot inside this place. That should be your position. What is so wrong about this? A Baptist cannot enter the church of a Seventh-day Adventist. They have these denominational rivalries going on so much that if one person from one particular denomination marries another person from another particular denomination, they will be denied even access to burial grounds. Do we do that in our communities? If that is the case, it is important for the judiciary to understand one or two things. One, when it strikes a distinction between religious aspects of a religious institution and secular aspects of a secular institution, it is effectively pushing a Hindu dharmic institution into a Christian setup. I'll give you another example. And Srihari is aware of this because both of us have worked on quite a few matters together. What is the word in English for sampradaya? Religious denomination is the word that the constitution uses for sampradaya. Now, religious denomination as a word in the 1950s obviously could have meant only Christian denominations, because this word is traceable and its definition in Oxford dictionary around that period obviously was not a reference to Hindu institutions in the 1950s. So when this word was being interpreted by the Supreme Court in 1954 in the Shirur Mutt judgment, which is one of the Ashtamathas, please read that judgment because it has huge consequences. And that is currently the subject of the Sabarimala judgment as well as petitions relating to freeing temples from state control. So what I will do is that I will share the link to the judgment to the organizers so that all of you can read it. Now assume for a moment that you are trying to find the meaning of a term that is used in Quran. Will you refer to the Oxford dictionary to understand its meaning? You will not. Then why do you want to use the Oxford dictionary to understand the meaning of the word sampradaya? What is the logic? So in that judgment, which is treated as the landmark judgment on what is the meaning of a religious denomination, not one reference to one Hindu commentary on what is the meaning of a sampradaya. Because the court was trying to understand what is the role of a matha and what is the role of a mathadipati in a matha. And the question was whether a matha and its followers constitute a religious denomination within the meaning of Article 26, so that they can protect their independence in matters of running the institution as well as religious affairs. This was the question that the court was asking. During the entire analysis, not one whisper on what is the meaning of a matha. Whether a matha or a sampradaya as understood in Dharma is the same as the manner in which a religious denomination is understood in Christianity. No such question is ever asked. Why? Because the constitution is written in English. And therefore, your go-to reference when you don't understand the meaning of a word or if you think it's ambiguous is an English dictionary. So understand the close nexus between bhasha and thinking, how they influence each other and what kind of outcomes it can lead to. So in that judgment, here's what the Supreme Court does. It says, Mathadipati is someone who is meant to be the custodian of that particular institution, and therefore, if an executive officer is appointed by the state to supersede the powers of the Mathadhipati and take away his power to run that particular institution, it effectively translates to government takeover of the Matha, which is not permissible. To that extent, the court is right. Now, since that judgment was delivered in the context of a Matha, and this was in the context of the Hindu religious and charitable endowment legislations of then Madras Presidency, which included current day Karnataka, certain parts of Andhra Pradesh, and current day Tamil Nadu. The Tamil Nadu government said, since the judgment was delivered only in the context of a Matha, according to the Supreme Court, I can't take over a Matha, but I can take over a temple which is not connected to a Matha. So the logic of the state government is, it was a Matha which was the subject of the judgment, not a temple which is not connected to a Matha. And therefore, the freedom and independence that is available to a Matha is not available to those institutions that are not connected to a Matha. So today as it stands, as the law stands, these legislations strike a distinction between temples which are standalone temples and temples which are connected to Mathas. In the process, some have become second grade institutions. Now ask yourself a simple question. If the issue is of religious autonomy of a religious, or let's say autonomy of a religious institution, why should the logic be different between a Matha and a temple? What is the logic? If you believe that the state is fundamentally a secular entity under the current constitution, whether it is a Matha or a temple which is not connected to a Matha should not make a difference to the fact that a secular state has no business being inside that particular institution. That logic is uniformly applicable. That particular logic has not occurred to the Indian state for the last 60 years. So as a consequence, what has happened is, despite the Shirur Math judgment clearly saying that the state does not have the power to take over a religious institution permanently, all it can do is to rectify mismanagement and get out of that particular institution and give it back to the community. For the last 60 years, at least since 1959, despite a Supreme Court judgment, state governments have taken the position that the judgment does not apply to standalone temples. And therefore, you have executive officers who have been appointed across the board, with or without reasons, in temples across the board in all the southern states, at least in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Telangana. And the situation is not that different in, let's say, Uttar Pradesh. Uttarakhand has just come out with a recent legislation withdrawing its own let's say, control over temples, that too after massive public pressure. But the point I'm trying to make is, even the Supreme Court's verdict has no value, and its position has no value when it comes to the rights of the Hindu community. Now therefore, if the problem statement is that either the institution sometimes does not understand your position, or even if it happens to understand your position by some happy coincidence, the state is not willing to listen to the Supreme Court, then what are the options left to the Hindu community? I am posing this question to the community as a practicing lawyer, saying, what are the options available to you if even the word of the highest constitutional court of the land has no value in the eyes of state governments?